I knew this morning that my life was about to spiral into the worst nightmare imaginable. My stepmother dragged me by the arm through the ornate drawing room where two alphas sat like kings on their throne-like sofas. Their aura was so intimidating that my breath nearly stopped. "Here's your gift," she said, shoving me forward like I was some cheap trophy. "Keep him or break him. I don't care either way. My name is Eric, a hidden omega that the entire world calls a freak. I have a dark birthmark on my right cheek that spreads down to my neck, and my thick glasses earn me the nickname Four Eyes Monster. No one has ever looked at me with kindness. My stepmother has always treated me like garbage from a dumpster, and today she took her ultimate revenge, handing me over to Thorn and Kane Ashford. Twin alphas. Ruthless. Dangerous. The entire city knew they used omegas like disposable toys and then discarded them without a second thought. When I stepped into their sprawling estate, my heartbeat slowed to an almost painful crawl. Light from massive chandeliers reflected off marble floors, and standing in the center were the two of them, identical faces, carved jawlines, penetrating storm-gray eyes that seemed to see straight through me. Thorn stood on the left with a straight posture and a cold expression that made my stomach drop. Kane was on the right, a subtle smirk playing on his lips, but his eyes held something else, curiosity. "Step forward," Thorn commanded, his voice deep and authoritative. My legs felt like jelly, but I forced myself to move closer. My natural scent, rain-kissed jasmine, mixed with something sweet, began to release slowly into the air. Omega pheromones trigger alpha senses directly, and I could see both of their nostrils flare in response. Kane moved first. He stepped forward and took my left hand, not roughly, but surprisingly gentle, and immediately noticed the old bruises on my wrist. "Who did this?" he asked quietly, though there was hidden anger in his tone. Before I could answer, Thorn appeared in front of me and adjusted my glasses that had slipped down my nose. "Look at me," Thorn said softly. When I met his eyes, I saw no cruelty, only concern, protection. "You're trembling," Kane observed, his thumb gently tracing circles on my knuckles. "Why are you so scared?" What could I say? That I thought they would torture me? That I believed every horrible rumor I'd heard? But Thorn seemed to read my thoughts and said, "We're not monsters, Eric. And whoever told you that, lied." Those words cracked something open in my chest. My stepmother had already left, slamming the door behind her without a backward glance. I stood there between these two massive alphas, feeling smaller than I ever had in my life. The silence stretched on, heavy and thick, until Kane broke it. "Are you hurt anywhere else?" he asked, his eyes scanning my body with what looked like genuine concern. I shook my head mutely, not trusting my voice. Thorn circled around me slowly, and I could feel his gaze assessing every inch of me, not in a predatory way, but like he was cataloging injuries, looking for signs of harm. "When did you last eat?" Thorn asked from behind me. The question caught me off guard. I tried to remember. Breakfast had been 2 pieces of stale bread that morning because my stepmother said I didn't deserve anything fresh. "This morning," I whispered. "That's not what I asked," Thorn said, coming back around to face me. "When did you last have a proper meal?" I couldn't answer that. Days? Weeks? My stepmother made sure I only got scraps, leftovers that even the household staff wouldn't touch. My silence must have been answer enough, because Kane's jaw clenched. "Come with me," Kane said, taking my hand again. This time his grip was firmer, more possessive. He led me through corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly, each one more luxurious than the last. Thorn followed behind us, his presence a solid wall at my back. We entered a massive kitchen that looked like it belonged in a 5-star restaurant. Kane pulled out a chair at the kitchen island. "Sit." It wasn't a request. I sat, my hands folded in my lap, watching as he moved around the kitchen with practiced ease. Thorn against the counter beside me, his arms crossed over his broad chest. "Do you have any allergies?" Kane asked, pulling out ingredients from the refrigerator. "No," I managed to say, though my voice came out barely above a whisper. "Good." Kane began preparing food, real food, not scraps or leftovers. I watched in stunned silence as he cooked, his movements efficient and confident. The smell alone made my stomach growl embarrassingly loud. Thorn's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "Hungry?" I felt my face heat up. "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize." Thorn cut me off sharply. Not for basic needs. Not ever. Cain placed a plate in front of me, grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, and fresh bread that was still warm. My eyes widened. This was more food than I'd seen in weeks. Eat, Cain kicked. Sitting across from me, I picked up the fork with shaking hands and took a small bite. The flavors exploded on my tongue, and before I knew it, I was eating faster, trying to savor every bite while also fighting the instinct to devour everything before it could be taken away. Slow down, Thorn said gently, placing a hand on my shoulder. No one's going to take it from you. I forced myself to eat slower, even though every part of me wanted to rush. When I finally finished, I realized both alphas had been watching me the entire time. Not with disgust or pity, but with something that looked almost like satisfaction. Better? Cain asked. I nodded, unable to form words. My stomach was full for the first time in recent memory, and I felt tears threatening to spill over. I blinked them back quickly, not wanting to appear weak. You'll have 3 meals a day here, Thorn stated matter-of-factly, plus snacks whenever you want them. The kitchen is always open to you. Why? The question burst out of me before I could stop it. Why are you being nice to me? Both alphas exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. Finally, Cain spoke. Because you deserve kindness, Eric. And because, he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully, we see something in you that others are too blind to notice. I wanted to ask what they saw, but exhaustion suddenly crashed over me like a wave. The stress of the day, the full stomach, the emotional whiplash, it all caught up at once. I swayed slightly in my seat. You need rest, Thorn said immediately. He stood, and before I could protest, he scooped me up in his arms like I weighed nothing. I should have been embarrassed, should have struggled, but instead I found myself relaxing against his solid chest. His scent, pine and winter frost, enveloped me, oddly comforting. He carried me up a grand staircase and down another hallway, finally entering a bedroom that was bigger than the entire servants' quarters where I'd lived at my stepmother's house. The bed looked impossibly soft, covered in plush blankets and pillows. Thorn set me down gently on the edge of the bed. Cain appeared in the doorway with a set of clean clothes. These should fit, he said, placing them beside me. Bathrooms through that door. Take your time. They both turned to leave, but I found my voice one more time. Thank you. They paused. Thorn looked back over his shoulder, and for the first time I saw a genuine smile cross his face. Get some rest, Eric. Tomorrow's a new day. As the door closed behind them, I sat in the quiet luxury of the room, trying to process everything that had happened. This wasn't what I expected. These alphas weren't what I expected. And for the first time in years, I felt a tiny spark of something I'd almost forgotten existed. The first 2 weeks passed in a surreal haze where I constantly waited for the illusion to shatter. But what kept happening was beyond anything my traumatized mind could have invented. These 2 alphas treated me like something precious. Thorn woke at 5 every morning for training. But before he left, he always came to my room and adjusted my blankets. I pretended to sleep at first, but one morning when he pressed a soft kiss to my forehead and whispered, "Sleep well, little one," my heart raced so fast I was certain he could hear it. Cain proved to be even more unpredictable. One evening I was alone in the library, struggling to read a book whose title I could barely make out, when he appeared behind me. Having trouble? He asked, leaning over my shoulder. His scent, dark espresso and leather, made me dizzy. I nodded nervously, and he smiled. Taking the book from my hands, "Let me read to you." Then he did something that made my brain short-circuit. He pulled me onto his lap. I froze completely, my cheeks burning red. But Cain casually opened the book and began reading aloud, one hand secured around my waist. His voice was smooth and calming, and for the first time in my life I felt genuinely safe. But the real turning point came one night when I went to the kitchen for water. The lights were dim and I thought I was alone. Suddenly, Thorn emerged from the shadows, shirtless with his hair still wet from a shower. My eyes involuntarily traveled to his toned chest before I snapped them to the floor. "Can't sleep?" he asked, stepping closer. I backed against the counter. I was just thirsty. Thorn picked up a glass, filled it with water and brought it to my lips. Drink. The intimacy of this moment overwhelmed me. I tried to take the glass, but he wouldn't release it. "Let me," he insisted, and I had to drink while he held it. When I finished, he set the glass aside and traced my birthmark with his thumb. So gently, like it was a delicate artifact. "This mark," he murmured, "it's like a constellation. Beautiful." Tears filled my eyes. How could anyone say such things? "You don't have to lie." "I never lie, Eric," Thorn said firmly, cupping my face. "Especially not to you." At that moment, Kane entered the kitchen, assessed the situation, and simply smiled. "Couldn't stay away, could you?" he said to Thorn. Thorn smirked. "Neither could you." Both of them looked at me simultaneously, and I understood. Whatever this was, it was real. The dynamic shifted after that night. They stopped pretending there wasn't something building between us. Small touches became frequent. A hand on my lower back, fingers brushing mine, protective arms around my shoulders in public. 3 days later, Thorn took me to the estate's art room, a space I hadn't known existed. Floor-to-ceiling windows let in natural light, and the room was stocked with every art supply imaginable. "I noticed you doodling on napkins," he explained. "I thought you might want proper materials." I stared at the room in shock. No one had ever paid attention to my small habits, let alone indulged them. "This is all for me. Everything we have is for you," Thorn replied simply. I spent that afternoon painting while Thorn sat nearby, working on his laptop. The comfortable silence between us felt intimate in a way I'd never experienced. When I finally stepped back to look at what I'd created, an abstract piece in blues and purples, Thorn came to stand beside me. "You have real talent," he said, and the pride in his voice made my chest tight. That evening, Kane took me to his office, a space of glass and steel with a view of the city skyline. "I want to show you something," he said, pulling out a folder. Inside were documents detailing charitable organizations, specifically ones that helped abused omegas. "Thorn and I run these," Kane explained. "Our reputation as ruthless alphas? It's intentionally cultivated to keep predators away from vulnerable omegas. We protect people like you." My entire worldview shifted. These men weren't monsters, they were protectors hiding behind a carefully constructed mask. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Kane's expression softened. "Because we want you to know who we really are. No secrets between us." The next morning brought another surprise. Thorn appeared at my bedroom door wearing training gear. "Come with me," he said. I followed him to a private gym I hadn't seen before. "You need to learn to protect yourself," he stated. "Not because we won't always be there, but because you should never feel helpless again." He spent the next hour teaching me basic self-defense moves. His patience was remarkable. When I lost my balance, he caught me. When I grew tired, he brought me water. And when I successfully completed a move, his genuine smile of pride made me feel 10 feet tall. "That's perfect," he said after I executed a particularly difficult maneuver. "You're stronger than you think, Eric." Days blended into each other, each one bringing new discoveries. I learned that Kane loved old movies, and would watch them with me on rainy afternoons. I discovered that Thorn played piano beautifully and would sometimes play for me late at night when I couldn't sleep. But the biggest revelation came during my 3rd week there. I accidentally wandered into their private study. The door had been left open and found myself surrounded by photographs on the walls. Charity events, omega shelters they'd built, and mixed among them, recent photos of me, sleeping, reading, painting with an expression of pure concentration. "You found our collection," Kane's voice came from the doorway. I spun around, caught in the act. He leaned against the doorframe with an amused expression. Slightly obsessive. "I know, we couldn't help ourselves." "Why would you want pictures of me?" I asked, genuinely confused. Kane's amusement faded into something more serious. He walked closer until he was right in front of me. "Because from the moment you walked through our door, something clicked into place. Something we'd been missing our entire lives." Thorn appeared behind him, and I felt surrounded, not trapped, but protected. "We've been waiting for you, Eric," Thorn said. "Even before we knew you existed." "I don't understand," I whispered. "Fated mates," Kane said simply. "It's rare. Some alphas never find theirs. But when we saw you, we knew. The bond, the pull. It was instant." My mind reeled. Fated mates were supposed to be fairy tales, not reality. But looking at their faces, seeing the absolute conviction in their eyes, I couldn't deny what I felt, that inexplicable connection that had been growing stronger every day. "Both of you?" I asked shakily. "Both of us," they confirmed in unison. I opened my mouth to respond when suddenly, aggressive pounding echoed through the house. A shrill voice I knew too well screamed from downstairs. "Eric, I know you're here. Come out right now." My stepmother had found me. Every muscle in my body locked up as paralyzing fear crashed over me. The room spun and I couldn't breathe. Strong arms wrapped around me instantly. Thorn from behind anchoring me. "Breathe," he commanded gently. "We've got you." Kane's expression turned dangerous. "Stay here," he ordered, already heading for the door, but I couldn't let them face her alone. Whatever happened next, I needed to be part of it. I had to finally stand up for myself. My legs moved before my brain caught up. I pushed past Kane and ran down the stairs, Thorn calling my name behind me. When I reached the main hall, my stepmother was there, arguing with the security guards who were blocking her entry. Her eyes locked onto me and that familiar cruel smile spread across her face. "There you are, you ungrateful little rat," she hissed. "Did you really think you could hide from me?" My throat closed up. All those years of conditioning, of being made to feel worthless, came flooding back. I wanted to run, to hide, to disappear, but then I felt Thorn's presence behind me. Solid, unwavering, and Kane appeared at my side. "You need to leave," Kane said coldly. "Now." My stepmother laughed, the sound grating against my nerves. "I'm taking back what's mine. Eric, get your things. Your father demands you return home immediately." "My father doesn't even know I exist," I heard myself say. The words came out shakier than I wanted, but they came out. "He never cared where I was or what happened to me. This is just another one of your manipulations." Her face twisted with rage. "How dare you speak to me that way? How dare you?" Thorn's voice cut through like ice. "Come to our home and make demands. Eric is under our protection now. You have no claim to him." "Protection?" My stepmother's laugh turned shrill. "Is that what you're calling it? Everyone knows what you two do to omegas. You're probably worse than anything I ever did to him." Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the weeks of kindness I'd received. Maybe it was finally understanding what real care looked like. Whatever it was, it gave me courage I didn't know I had. "You're wrong," I said, my voice growing stronger. "They've shown me more compassion in 3 weeks than you did in years. You starved me, beat me, told me I was worthless every single day. You made me believe I deserved nothing better." My stepmother's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You think you're special now? Look at yourself. You're still the same ugly, pathetic." "Enough." Kane's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. He stepped between us, his alpha presence flooding the room. "You will not speak to him that way. Not now. Not ever again." Security moved to escort her out, but she fought against them. "This isn't over. I'll be back with lawyers. I'll take you to court. You can't just steal someone's." "We didn't steal anyone," Thorn interrupted. "Eric chose to stay, and that choice is his to make, not yours." She was dragged out, still screaming threats, and when the door finally closed, silence fell over the hall. I stood there shaking, adrenaline coursing through my system. I'd actually stood up to her. After years of cowering, I'd finally found my voice. "Are you all right?" Kane asked, his hand gentle on my shoulder. I nodded, then shook my head, then started laughing, a slightly hysterical sound. "I can't believe I just did that." "We can," Thorn said, pulling me into an embrace. "You've always had that strength. You just needed to see it." The next few days passed in tense anticipation. True to her word, my stepmother filed legal papers claiming I was being held against my will. The media caught wind of the story. Twin alphas in custody battle over Omega, and suddenly our private lives were public entertainment. Kane hired the best lawyers money could buy, but I could see the stress weighing on both him and Thorn. They tried to hide it from me, conducting hushed phone calls in other rooms, but I wasn't blind. "I'm sorry," I said one evening when we were all in the living room. "I'm causing you so much trouble." "You're not causing anything," Thorn said immediately. "She is, and we're going to handle it." The court date arrived faster than I expected. Walking into that courthouse with cameras flashing and reporters shouting questions was terrifying. But Thorn and Kane flanked me, shielding me from the worst of it. Inside the courtroom, my stepmother sat with her lawyer, wearing an expression of false concern that made my skin crawl. When I was called to the witness stand, My hands trembled as I placed them on the Bible. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, studied me carefully. "Please state your name for the record." "Eric Morrison," I said, my voice barely steady. "And you understand why we're here today?" "Yes, Your Honor. My stepmother claims I'm being held against my will by Thorne and Kane Ashford." "Is that true?" I took a deep breath, looking directly at the judge. "No, Your Honor. I'm here by choice. They've never forced me to do anything. In fact, they've given me more freedom and respect than I've ever known." My stepmother's lawyer jumped up. "Your Honor, the defendant has clearly been manipulated." "I haven't been manipulated," I interrupted, louder than I intended. "I've been cared for. There's a difference." The judge gestured for me to continue. So I did. I told her everything. The years of abuse, the starvation, the constant degradation. I showed her the scars on my arms from being disciplined. I presented medical records that Thorne and Kane's lawyer had helped me obtain, documenting injuries from my time in my stepmother's house. "These men," I said, gesturing to where Thorne and Kane sat, "they fed me. They gave me a safe place to sleep. They encouraged my interests and treated me like a person. If that's manipulation, then I'll gladly be manipulated for the rest of my life." The judge listened to testimony from both sides. Character witnesses spoke about Thorne and Kane's charity work. Medical professionals confirmed my history of abuse. Hours passed in a blur of legal proceedings. Finally, the judge delivered her verdict. "After reviewing all evidence and testimony, I find no merit to the claim that Eric Morrison is being held against his will. Furthermore, evidence of past abuse is substantial enough to warrant a restraining order against Mrs. Morrison. She is to have no contact with Eric, directly or indirectly, effective immediately." The gavel came down. It was over. Relief flooded through me so intensely I nearly collapsed. Kane caught my arm, steadying me. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed us again, but this time I didn't hide. When they asked how I felt, I looked directly into the cameras. "I feel free," I said simply. That night, back at the estate, I found myself in the art room again. Thorne and Kane had given me space to process everything, but eventually they found me there, staring at a blank canvas. "Thank you," I said without turning around. "For fighting for me, for believing me, for everything." "We'll always fight for you," Kane replied, coming to stand beside me. "That's what you do for the people you love." The word hung in the air. Love. Neither of them had said it before, not directly. My heart stuttered. Thorne appeared on my other side. "We've been holding back," he admitted, "trying not to overwhelm you. But Eric, you need to know this isn't just about the mate bond. We love you, who you are, how you think, your strength, your kindness. All of it." I turned to face them, tears streaming down my face. "I love you too. Both of you. I didn't think I was capable of feeling this much, but you showed me how." Kane smiled and wiped away my tears. "So what happens now?" I thought about it, really thought about my future for the first time in my life. "Now I live," I said. "I paint. I grow. I become the person I was always meant to be." "With us?" Thorne asked. "With you," I confirmed. "Always." The screaming started before dawn. My stepmother's shrill voice echoed through the entire estate, penetrating even the thick walls of my bedroom. "Eric, stop hiding like a coward. Your father is waiting." I bolted upright in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. The sound of her voice, that specific pitch of rage mixed with false authority, triggered every survival instinct I'd developed over years of abuse. My hands started shaking uncontrollably, and suddenly I couldn't get enough air into my lungs. Thorne burst through my door within seconds, still in his workout clothes from his early morning training. "Eric, look at me," he commanded, but his voice was gentle as he knelt beside my bed. His hands framed my face, forcing me to focus on his storm-gray eyes instead of the chaos downstairs. "Match my breathing. In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. I tried to follow his pattern, but my chest felt too tight. Memories were flooding back, her hand across my face, the days locked in the cold basement, the constant reminders that I was worthless, unwanted, a burden she couldn't wait to be rid of. "She's going to take me back," I gasped out, between ragged breaths. "She'll find a way to—" "No one is taking you anywhere." Kane's voice cut through my panic as he appeared in the doorway. Unlike Thorne, he was already dressed in a sharp suit, clearly prepared for confrontation. Yours, Eric. Legally, emotionally, and by every law that matters. She has no claim. But my stepmother's screaming continued, now mixed with threats directed at the security staff. I could hear her demanding to see the stolen property she'd generously donated. The words made my stomach turn. I'd never been a person to her, just an object to be used or discarded. I need to go down there, I said suddenly, surprising even myself. Both alphas turned to stare at me. If I don't face her, she'll never stop. She'll keep coming back, keep finding ways to insert herself into our lives. This has to end. Absolutely not, Thorn said immediately. You're not putting yourself in her crosshairs again. But Kane studied me with those calculating eyes of his. He's right, he said slowly. Running won't solve this. She needs to see that Eric isn't the broken child she remembers. Thorn's jaw clenched. If she touches him, she won't get the chance, Kane assured him. We'll be right there. I forced myself to stand on shaky legs, pulling on a robe over my pajamas. I caught my reflection in the mirror, pale, trembling. But my eyes held a determination that hadn't been there weeks ago. These alphas had given me something precious. They'd shown me I was worth fighting for. Now I needed to prove I could fight for myself. The three of us descended the stairs together. I could see my stepmother in the foyer, her face red with exertion as she berated the security guards who were physically blocking her entry. She wore an expensive designer suit and perfectly applied makeup, playing the role of concerned guardian to perfection. The moment she saw me, her expression shifted to something sickeningly sweet. Eric, darling, thank goodness you're all right. I've been so worried about you. Don't call me that, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. You've never called me darling in your life. Her mask slipped for just a second, revealing the cold calculation underneath. Now, Eric, I know these men have confused you, but it's time to come home. Your father misses you terribly. My father doesn't even remember my birthday, I replied. And you know that because you're the one who made sure he never paid attention to me in the first place. She laughed, the sound grating. Such accusations. The trauma these alphas have caused must be severe. Don't worry, sweetheart. I've already contacted my lawyers. We'll have you rescued from this situation immediately. Rescued? Something hot flared in my chest, anger. Pure and righteous. You want to rescue me? Where was this concern when you locked me in the basement for 2 days? Because I accidentally broke a plate. Where was it when you told me I was too ugly to eat at the family table? Where was it every single time you reminded me that I was a mistake my father would never love? The foyer went completely silent. Even the security guards had stopped moving. My stepmother's face had gone pale, then flushed an ugly red. You ungrateful little. She lunged forward, and for a split second I saw her hand rising just like it had 100 times before. But this time was different. Kane moved like lightning, catching her wrist in midair with such force that she cried out. His eyes had shifted to that eerie alpha gold, and his voice dropped to a growl that made the windows rattle. You just made the worst mistake of your life. Thorn had moved to my side, one arm wrapped protectively around my waist. Eric gave you a chance to leave with some dignity, he said coldly. You should have taken it. My stepmother tried to jerk her arm free, but Kane's grip was unbreakable. You're hurting me. Let go, or I'll press charges for assaults. By all means, press charges, Kane said with a dangerous smile. We'll be filing our own. Assault of a minor, child endangerment, abuse, and those are just the charges we can prove with hospital records and witness testimony. The color drained from her face. You're bluffing. Try us, Thorn challenged. For the first time since I'd known her, I saw genuine fear in my stepmother's eyes. She looked at me, perhaps hoping to see the cowering child she'd spent years creating. Instead, she found someone who'd learned what real strength looked like. Get out, I said quietly. And don't come back. Whatever relationship you think we had, it's over. I'm not your property, not your punching bag, and definitely not your responsibility. I'm exactly where I choose to be. Kane released her wrist and she stumbled backward, nearly falling in her expensive heels. Security moved in immediately, escorting her toward the door as she sputtered protests and threats. This isn't finished, she shrieked as they guided her outside. I'll see you in court. All of you. You can't just steal someone. The door closed, cutting off her tirade. The silence that followed felt almost sacred. My knees gave out, and both alphas caught me before I hit the floor. They lowered me gently onto the nearby couch, and I realized I was shaking not from fear this time, but from the aftermath of adrenaline. "You did it," Kane said, and there was such pride in his voice that it brought tears to my eyes. "You stood your ground." "I was terrified," I admitted. "Bravery isn't the absence of fear," Thorn said, brushing hair back from my forehead. "It's acting despite it, and you were incredible." I wanted to bask in that moment, wanted to believe it was truly over. But Kane's phone buzzed, and when he checked it, his expression hardened into something dangerous. "What is it?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "She's filed an emergency petition with the courts," he said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "She's claiming we kidnapped you and are holding you prisoner. The hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning." My heart sank. Of course it wasn't over. People like my stepmother never gave up when they thought they could win. "Then we'll be ready," Thorn said firmly. "We have evidence, witnesses, and most importantly, we have the truth." I looked between these two alphas who'd given me everything and nodded. "Let her bring her lawyers. Let her bring the whole court system. I'm not backing down." Kane smiled, fierce and proud. "That's our Omega." As they helped me to my feet and we headed upstairs to prepare for the legal battle ahead, I realized something profound had shifted inside me. I wasn't just fighting for my freedom anymore. I was fighting for my future, and I'd never been more determined to win. The courthouse steps were a nightmare of flashing cameras and shouted questions. Reporters had somehow gotten wind of the case, probably leaked by my stepmother's legal team, and they swarmed us like vultures the moment our car pulled up. "Eric, is it true you're involved with both alphas? Are you being coerced? What do you say to allegations of Stockholm Syndrome?" The questions came from all directions. Microphones thrust into my face, cameras blinding me with their lights. My instinct was to hide, to make myself small and invisible like I'd learned to do over years of abuse. But Thorn's hand was firm on my lower back, and Kane walked slightly ahead, his imposing alpha presence creating a path through the crowd. "Keep your eyes on me," Thorn murmured in my ear. "Block out everything else." I focused on the back of Kane's head, on the steady pressure of Thorn's hand guiding me forward, and somehow made it through the chaos and into the courthouse's relative quiet. Inside, our legal team was already assembled, 3 sharp-eyed lawyers who Kane had hired at enormous expense. The lead attorney, a stern woman named Patricia Chen, gave me an encouraging nod as we approached. "Remember what we discussed," she said. "Answer honestly and directly. Don't let her lawyer bait you into anger." "And Eric," she paused, her expression softening slightly, "you're stronger than you think. Trust that." The courtroom itself was smaller than I'd expected from television dramas, but somehow more intimidating. Dark wood paneling, harsh fluorescent lights, and at the front, an older woman in black robes who would decide my fate. Judge Caroline Hendricks, according to the nameplate on her bench. My stepmother sat on the opposite side with her lawyer, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit. She'd dressed for maximum sympathy, a conservative dress, minimal makeup, and an expression of concerned motherhood that made me want to scream at the hypocrisy. "All rise," the bailiff announced, and we stood as the judge took her seat. The proceedings began with opening statements. My stepmother's lawyer painted a picture of a vulnerable, mentally unstable Omega who'd been manipulated by predatory alphas. He used words like groomed and brainwashed, suggesting I was too damaged to make my own decisions. Our lawyer countered with facts: my age, my legal status as an adult, and the documented history of abuse that had driven me from my stepmother's house in the first place. Then came the testimonies. My stepmother took the stand first, and I had to admire her acting skills. Tears leaked from her eyes as she described how worried she'd been, how she'd only wanted the best for me, how she couldn't understand why I'd run away. "He was always such a sensitive child," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, "prone to exaggeration and fantasy. I tried my best to provide structure, but he resented any form of discipline." Discipline. That's what she was calling it now. When it came time for cross-examination, Patricia stood and approached the stand with predatory grace. "Mrs. Morrison, you mentioned providing structure. Can you describe what form that structure took?" "The usual things," my stepmother said carefully. "Chores, expectations, rules about behavior." "I see. And when Eric failed to meet these expectations, what happened?" "He would be grounded, of course. sent to his room to think about his actions. Patricia pulled out a document. Is this Eric's medical record from 3 years ago? The one documenting a fractured wrist and bruising consistent with physical assault. My stepmother's lawyer jumped up. Objection. That injury was from a fall. A fall that somehow resulted in a perfect handprint-shaped bruise on his upper arm? Patricia's voice cut through the objection. Your Honor, I have photographs. The judge examined the evidence, her expression growing darker. Overruled. Answer the question, Mrs. Morrison. Children are clumsy, my stepmother said, but her confident facade was cracking. I can't be held responsible for every accident. What about the basement? I found myself saying. Everyone turned to stare at me. Are you going to explain the basement too? My stepmother's face went white. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Morrison, please wait for your turn to testify. However, she fixed my stepmother with a stern look. I would like to hear about this basement. After my stepmother fumbled through an unconvincing explanation, it was finally my turn to take the stand. My legs felt like water as I walked up and placed my hand on the Bible, swearing to tell the truth. Patricia asked gentle questions at first, establishing the basic facts of my case. Then she moved into harder territory. Eric, in your own words, can you describe your relationship with Thorne and Kane Ashford? I took a breath, looking at where they sat side by side. Thorne's expression was controlled, but I could see the tension in his jaw. Kane gave me the smallest nod of encouragement. They saved me, I said simply. Not from some dramatic danger, but from believing I was worthless. They showed me what it feels like to be valued, respected, cared for. They're my mates, my fated mates, and being with them is the first time in my life I felt truly safe. And you're here of your own free will? Completely. No one has ever tried to stop me from leaving. In fact, I pulled out my phone. I have messages from Kane giving me emergency contacts, money for transportation, and assurance that I could leave anytime I felt uncomfortable. Does that sound like kidnapping? My stepmother's lawyer tried to recover during his cross-examination, but every question he asked gave me the opportunity to reveal another truth about my past. Yes, I had scars. Yes, I'd been hospitalized multiple times as a child. Yes, my stepmother had controlled every aspect of my life, including food, social contact, and even medical care. By the time he sat down, he looked defeated. The judge called for a brief recess. Thorne and Kane surrounded me immediately, creating a protective barrier as reporters tried to push closer. You were perfect, Kane said quietly. She can't win now, Thorne added. The evidence is too overwhelming. When court resumed, the judge didn't waste time. I've reviewed all testimony and evidence presented today. The claim that Eric Morrison is being held against his will is not only unsupported by facts, it's contradicted by substantial evidence of abuse in his previous living situation. My stepmother started to stand, but her lawyer pulled her back down. Therefore, this petition is denied. Furthermore, I'm granting a restraining order prohibiting Mrs. Morrison from contacting Eric Morrison through any means. Violation will result in immediate arrest. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. This court is adjourned. Relief flooded through me so intensely that I actually swayed. Kane steadied me with a hand on my elbow, while Thorne spoke rapidly with our legal team. Outside, the reporters were waiting again, but this time I didn't hide. When they asked how I felt, I looked directly into the cameras. I feel like I can finally breathe, I said, and I'm grateful to live in a world where the truth actually matters. That night, safely back home, I stood in the art room staring at a blank canvas. So much had happened, so much had changed. I picked up a brush and began to paint bold strokes of color, bright and defiant. Thorne appeared in the doorway, watching silently. What are you creating? My future, I said, adding another splash of vibrant blue. And it's going to be beautiful. 6 months later, I barely recognized my own reflection. Not because I'd changed physically. The birthmark was still there. I'd gone back to wearing glasses, because contacts irritated my eyes. But because the person staring back at me stood differently, confident, unashamed, loved. Tonight was the PAC's annual gala, and I was terrified. Stop fidgeting, Kane said, adjusting my bow tie for the 3rd time. We stood in our bedroom, not just theirs, and he was dressed in a tailored tuxedo that made him look dangerous and elegant simultaneously. I can't help it, I admitted. These are all elite alphas and omegas. They're going to judge. Let them, Thorn interrupted, emerging from the closet in his own formal wear. Their opinions mean nothing compared to what we know is true. Easy for them to say. They were powerful, respected, beautiful. I was still the omega with the birthmark and the traumatic past, now complicated by the fact that I was mated to both of them, a scandalous arrangement even in progressive circles. The mating ceremony had taken place a month after the court case. It was a private affair, just the three of us and a pack elder who'd performed the traditional bonding ritual. The marks on my neck, twin crescent moons that intertwined perfectly, had sealed our bond permanently. I was theirs and they were mine in every way that mattered. But public acceptance was another matter entirely. The gala was held at the city's most prestigious venue, a historic building with soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers. We arrived fashionably late. Kane's strategy to make an entrance. When we walked through the doors, conversation didn't just pause, it stopped completely. Every head turned. I could feel hundreds of eyes assessing me, judging me, wondering what these powerful alphas possibly saw in someone like me. My hand tightened on Kane's arm and he covered it with his own, steady and reassuring. "Breathe," he whispered. We made our way through the crowd, and gradually conversations resumed, though I caught whispers and sidelong glances. Some were curious, others disapproving, a few outright hostile. Then Marcus approached a rival alpha, who'd apparently been competing with Thorn for some business contract. He was handsome in a classical way, with perfectly styled hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Well, he drawled, looking me up and down with barely concealed disdain. "So this is the notorious mate. I must say, Thorn, your taste has always been unconventional." I felt Thorn tense beside me, felt Kane's alpha instincts rising to defend me, but something in me refused to be defended this time. I'd spent too many months learning my own worth to let some pompous ache diminish it. "Unconventional," I repeated, stepping forward slightly. "Is that your polite way of saying you don't understand why they'd choose me?" Marcus's smile turned sharp. "I'm saying I question their judgment. Surely there were more suitable options." "Suitable," I said, and I could hear the steel in my own voice. "You mean prettier, more traditionally attractive, someone who'd make them look good at events like this?" "Well, here's what you don't understand," I continued, and now I had the attention of everyone nearby. "They didn't choose me to improve their image or advance their social standing. They chose me because we're fated mates, because when they look at me, they see strength and resilience and someone worth fighting for. Can you say the same about whoever you've chosen to parade around tonight?" The silence was deafening. Marcus's face had turned an interesting shade of red. "Furthermore," I added, on a roll now, "your opinion about my suitability matters exactly as much as I decide it does. Which is not at all." Kane made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Thorn's hand found the small of my back, a gesture of support and pride. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, then turned and walked away without another word. As soon as he was gone, scattered applause broke out. Apparently not everyone appreciated his attitude. "That," Kane said into my ear, "was incredibly attractive." "Agreed," Thorn murmured from my other side. "Remind me to provoke you more often." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. People approached us, some to congratulate, others to express genuine curiosity about our unusual mating bond. I found myself relaxing, even enjoying the attention. When Kane led me onto the dance floor, I went willingly. "You've changed so much," he said as we swayed to the music. "Do you realize that? I had good teachers," I replied. Thorn cut in halfway through the song. "Entirely improper by traditional standards. But we'd never been traditional." Having both of them dancing with me simultaneously drew stares, but I didn't care anymore. This was life. My choice. My happiness. Later, when we returned home, I found they'd prepared a surprise. The art studio they'd built for me had been expanded, and sitting in the center was an easel with a note attached. "Paint your dreams," it read. "We'll make sure they come true." I turned to find them both watching me with expressions of such tender affection that my throat tightened with emotion. "I already opened a gallery showing," I said. 3 of my paintings sold." "We know," Thorn said. "We bought one of them." "You what? Why would you buy my painting when you can just have it?" "'Cause we wanted to support you as an artist, not just as our mate," Kane explained. You deserved that validation from strangers who saw your work and valued it. I felt tears building and didn't bother to stop them. I love you both so much it scares me sometimes. They moved as one, surrounding me with their warmth and strength. We love you too, Thorn said. More than we knew was possible. You taught us something important, Kane added. That true strength isn't about power or dominance. It's about vulnerability, about letting someone in completely. You did that for us, even when you were terrified. I looked around at my studio, at the evidence of dreams I'd never dared to have becoming reality. I thought about the court case we'd won, the stepmother who could never hurt me again, the life I is building with these two incredible alphas. I used to think being called ugly was the worst thing that could happen to me. I said quietly. I let it define me for so long. But now I understand. Beauty isn't about symmetry or conventional attractiveness. It's about being seen, truly seen and loved for exactly who you are. And you are beautiful, they said in unison, then kissed me, one on each side of my neck. Right over their marks. The future stretched out before us, uncertain and full of possibilities. There would be challenges, obstacles, people who didn't understand our bond. But standing there between my mates, I felt invincible. I was Eric. I was loved. I was enough. And that was the most beautiful truth of all.